What should our goal in teaching be? There's a danger if we're not careful, if we're not crystal clear on what we're trying to accomplish when we stand up and open the Word and teach students. We can end up working for the wrong goals and celebrating the wrong things. And that is a scary prospect. If you spend all this time creating a message and you accomplish the goals you had in mind, and those are not the goals that you should actually have, you're not going to get the right result. And so, what are we trying to accomplish? What should we be trying to accomplish when we stand up and teach students? That's what I want to talk about in this video. Now, a lot of Christian teachers and pastors and youth pastors would jump in and say, well, we teach for discipleship. We want to make disciples. That's what we want to accomplish through our teaching. And my pushback is, well, what do you mean by discipleship? Because the fact is, when you say discipleship, almost everyone has a different definition in their head of what it means to make disciples. And so once again, you're not actually being clear on what you're trying to accomplish. Now, I agree. I think discipleship should be our goal, but I think we're not all on the same page about what it means to teach, to make disciples. So what does that mean? How do you do that? To help answer that question, I want to share with you some things I've learned from scholar Ray Vander Laan. Now, Ray Vander Laan is an expert on first century Judaism, and what's so helpful about his studies is he has studied the context in which Jesus grew up and lived and was educated, and it helps inform our idea of what discipleship means and how to teach in a way that really does engage in discipleship the way Jesus and his disciples would have in the first century. And so if you'd like other resources from Ray Vander Laan, I've included a link to his website and an article he wrote about rabbi and disciples and what that relationship would have looked like in the first century. But let me just summarize a couple of his points that relate to this whole concept of teaching in line with the goal of discipleship and how we do that. So when Jesus called his disciples and told them, "Follow me," what he was doing was he was inviting them to become his apprentices, you could say. He was inviting them to engage with him in an established system of education that was already well established by the time Jesus came on the scene. Now let me tell you a little bit about this rabbi and discipleship relationship. Most of the time, a potential disciple would have to apply to a rabbi in order to become their disciple. And this was a very coveted position. This is a very honored position. Only the brightest of the brightest, the best of the best, would be able to study under one of the great rabbis who had authority to make new interpretations of the law. But if you were one of the best, you could study around when you were a teenager, maybe as old as 20, to study under one of these great rabbis. And you would approach them and they would have all kinds of hard questions to ask you and maybe even put you on a trial period. But if at the end of the time the rabbi said, "Follow me," he was saying, I think you have what it takes to learn from me, to memorize my teaching, to understand it, and to live it out. And eventually, after I'm done training you, for you to be able to go and do that to others. I think you have what it takes to fully absorb my way of life and pass that on to others. Now, this was usually an 8 to 10 year process. And at the end of that time, the rabbi would commission the disciple, lay his hands on him, say, "I now commission you to be a rabbi and to go and make your own disciples." Now, what's fascinating to me about this is that in many ways, Jesus just adopted this system of education and copied and pasted it into his own ministry. Now, he departed from it in several significant ways. First of all, instead of letting the brightest of the brightest, the best of the best apply to him, he actually sought out his disciples, and he didn't choose the brightest of the brightest, the best of the best. And then also, Jesus only took 3 years. He didn't take the traditional 8 to 10 years. But the goals and the practices were the same. It was life-on-life transformation. His goal was for his disciples to do what all disciples would do, and that is to memorize his teaching, but more than that, to live out his teaching, because the idea was someone's interpretation of the law, a rabbi's interpretation of the law, was meant to be not just understood, but to be lived. And so there's like these sayings from the first century, like the mark of a good disciple is that they be covered in the dust of their rabbi. And the idea is a disciple would literally follow their master around, their rabbi around so closely that the dust that the rabbi kicked up from the road would be coated on the disciple. And that was a mark of a good disciple. They literally followed their master around everywhere, watching them, learning from them, and then emulating their way of life in their own life. So the question is, how do we teach with this goal in mind? Now, I don't think it works just to say, let's do the exact same things that Jesus did. In other words, let's just do this disciple and rabbi relationship ourselves. Now, you can give that a shot if you want, but for me, I don't think parents would be okay if I said to my middle school and high school students, hey guys, you're gonna move in with me now, and for the next 3 to 5 years, you're gonna follow me around everywhere I go and watch everything I do and do the same way. Maybe that'll work for you. If it does, let me know. But in our culture today, I don't think that system works. But here's the main point. The goal should be the same. The goal of discipleship is still life transformation into the image and likeness of our Rabbi, Jesus. So the question is, how can we teach our students in such a way that we get those results, that we're working for that goal? That's what I think it means to teach for discipleship. The goal is that our students are becoming like Jesus. This is like life training in the ways of Jesus. So the way I think of this is I think of 3 intersecting circles that we want to educate our students. We want to instruct their minds. We want to equip their bodies to live out the Jesus way of life, and we want to inspire their hearts. That's what it means to teach for discipleship. If the end goal of discipleship is apprenticeship in the Jesus way of life, then we have to teach the whole person to become like Jesus. So my goal every time I stand up to teach is to instruct the mind, equip the body, and inspire hearts to live the Jesus way of life. And you have to hit all 3 every time you teach, or else it doesn't work. So how do you do that? There's different ways, different methodologies to get at this. I developed a go-to outline that I use almost every single time I teach to students that makes sure that I do this, that there's points in my message where I'm talking to people's minds, there's points where I'm equipping their bodies to live the Jesus way of life and calling them to action, and there's inspiration for our emotions to follow this way. Now, you don't have to use my outline, but if you're interested in it, you can go to my website and download it for free. I also have another video that kind of walks through that outline in detail, and so I encourage you to watch that if that's something you're interested in. But regardless of whether you use my outline or not, our goal should be the same. We want to help students become like Jesus. And I just want to encourage you to trade out any lesser goals for this greater goal, okay? It's so easy to get excited when students actually pay attention, to make that the goal of teaching. Or when students think we're funny and laugh at all our jokes. Or when they actually remember what we said a week later. Like, that's the big one for me. Like, you remembered it? Yes, I won. I did it. That is not the goal of teaching. The goal is for them to become a little bit more like Jesus. I think every time you sit down to prepare a message, the question on your mind should be, will they be challenged to become a little more like Jesus because of this? That is what it means to teach for discipleship. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. My name is Luke Hiron. My desire is to help you create messages that change lives for good. If this content was helpful for you, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. For more free resources, go to my site, makeyourmessagegreat.com. There you can also download my go-to outline that helps you teach every learning style in the room with the goal of life transformation. I believe with God's help, you can instruct minds, equip bodies, and inspire hearts to live the Jesus way of life.